Hello, students, and welcome to the first lecture for Developmental English. Normally, I would just launch right into the lecture, but since this is the first one, I just kind of wanted to remind you of a few things. The lectures here are not to take the place of you reading the material on your own and are just kind of the supplement to those. Additionally, it's going to seem like a lot of reading every week, and that combined with the lecture, it may initially feel overwhelming for you. But I want you to remember that if this were a face to face class, you would be seeing me for hour and a half chunks at least twice a week, if not more than that. And so we're talking about 3 hours worth of content face to face that you can now stretch out on your own and slot into your life in a way that works for you best. So remember that face to face time would also have additional outside of class expectations, like the reading would still happen outside of that time period. And sometimes even some of the assignments, like you will have writing assignments. You're going to write an essay in this class in bit by bit over the course of this semester. So please just keep in mind that while it may initially seem like that there's a lot of things per week, really it's just because of the mode that you're taking this class, you're seeing everything at once. I try to keep everything into account in that we're all busy people, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed or lost or anything like that. And so that's why these lectures exist. That I'm not just going to give you a textbook and say, okay, read these pages, take this quiz, read the pages, take the quiz, or anything like that, that you may need additional guidance. That being said, this is developmental English, and it's supposed to get you ready for all of your classes in college that require intensive reading or writing skills. As such, we're kind of building you up from the foundation. And so some of this, for some of you, may feel like review. Specifically, this first unit where we're talking about how you're going to be reading or some strategies to use your time effectively while reading may come naturally to some of you, but there's still good reminders of best practices to use. So, for all of these lectures, they're going to have slides accompanying to them, and those slides will list the pages that they correspond with in the book. We're only going to have lectures on the reading part of the course. There are grammar chapters as well, and I consider those reference material for you that you're still expected to engage with and take quizzes over, but I'm going to have less direct instruction over those pieces. If you need additional support for those, you will be able to find resources on those and maybe some links to some outside places that I like to use if I have a student who's struggling with those. That being said, let's just jump into this particular lecture. So, we're going to be talking about reading to write. And really, within that, we're talking about how you're going to be going through a text in order to be thinking about the organization so that you can get your ideas together and then either respond to it or analyze it in a written work afterwards. We're going to be doing this with kind of 6 different steps where you're going to be understanding what it means to actively read, you're going to be building your vocabulary, you're going to understand what it means to write. And so if you know the process for each step, then you can keep that in the back of your mind while you're reading. Within that, we're going to be talking about intros, body, paragraphs, and conclusions. And then you're going to think about what it means to write critically instead of just writing maybe like a summary. And finally, different types of texts require different types of writing as a response to them. Like, for example, if you're going to, say, read a book just for pleasure, like fiction, then you may respond with some sort of review or literary analysis. Whereas if you're reading like a scientific study, Your response is not going to be one of whether you thought it was good or not personally. It's going to be a little bit more scientific in nature. So in this chapter, you're going to really be reading this and discovering strategies for the reading process. So things you do before you read, as you read, and after you read, and then finally how you respond to that in words. Okay, so why go through all of this? Well, in college, you'll be asked to do certain things. All of your classes are going to have some kind of reading in them. Even a math class is going to expect you to engage with the textbook, which will have some sort of analysis in it or procedure for how to do a certain thing. Your science classes definitely will as well. And of course, your English classes and your history classes are going to be much more focused on reading and then writing. A lot of history classes, for example, you may only have textbook and lecture, and then your grades in the class are simply writing a response to those and nothing else. So understanding this entire process will not just help you in developmental English or an English class, but in every class that you take in your college experience. Additionally, a lot of these classes may require you to write a research paper using some kind of professional formatting like MLA, APA, Chicago, something like that. In English, we use MLA format, and that's going to be your expectation. But just being exposed to the process, they have a lot of overlaps within them. And so that will be a good thing for you. So before you can write anything, though, you have to be able to read and understand the words. And so reading is that first step. And what does it mean to be an active reader? Well, it means that you are going in with the mindset of having a goal or a purpose to your reading and understanding that. So if you know, for example, that you're going to have to write a summary of what you're reading, then in the back of your mind, you should be looking for main ideas and how the author is connecting those together throughout the writing. So instead of just going through and saying, okay, I want to understand each sentence, you're really, really looking at what and how the ideas are connected, and then how you can draw your conclusions about them. An active reader is going to be doing something while they read, whether it's taking notes, whether it's just stopping and thinking about it, whatever it may be. So the first thing that you're going to do before you read is you're going to be honest with yourself, and you're going to create a schedule for yourself, okay? Because it's not going to be an effective process if you wait until the night before something's due and then you read an entire book at that time and then you take a test on it or try to write a paper on it or anything else, because all of that is going to be muddled inside of your head and you're really only going to get surface level ideas out of it. Additionally, taking a look at this class, so this class is a perfect example of it. You may have a lot of pages to read every week. So we're talking like 30 pages, 40 pages a week. If you know that, then it may be best to break down how many pages in each session you're going to sit down and read. And something that you should do if you haven't yet before in your life is read something of moderate difficulty for yourself. So not something very easy, not something that you don't understand at all, but just something standard for you, and see roughly how quickly you read. Some people can read a page a minute. Other people it takes 2 minutes for the same amount, and it just varies by person. And if you know that, then you can adjust your schedule accordingly, and you can set a schedule for yourself. The other thing to think about is you have to be honest with yourself. It's very easy to create a schedule where you say, okay, every day I'm going to read 5 pages. But if you know that on Mondays and Wednesdays, your schedule is already packed. You know, you work 2 jobs, you take care of your kids, something like that. Then on those days, those specific days, then you know that you're never going to get around to the 5 pages. And then it may discourage you. So be realistic. Set yourself a time where you know you're going to be free, and then really be honest with yourself about doing it. Give yourself bite-sized chunks, but force yourself to do it. That's turning off your phone, turning off your laptop if it's a physical book, uh, putting yourself somewhere where other people can't distract you, but only doing that to yourself for a time period that you know you're able to manage. You know, if you say, "Oh, I'm going to do this for 2 hours," and you know that you're going to get burned out and your eyes are going to glaze over after 10 minutes, then that's probably not an effective reading schedule for you. Okay, so we're going to practice this, and you're going to take a little bit of time, and you are going to create your own reading schedule. Later in this class, you're going to have a short story that you're going to need to read, and it's only 12 pages long. And then following it, you're going to answer a series of questions about the themes, the characters, all that good stuff. And you are then going to respond to it in one of our class discussions. You need to decide how you want to take notes in this class, whether it is digitally or on paper, but you need to do it. Some people take annotations in the book itself or on the story itself. That's up to you. That would require you to print it out and mark it up that way. But you need to think about these things. Now, to me, the best way of getting it inside of your brain is going to be any way that involves a pencil or a pen to paper. That studies show that you tend to retain information better that way, including like notes, rather than typing it up even. And I'm a big fan of typing things up and technology because it's so fast and you can take it anywhere with you. But studies show that that's a really, really good way of doing it. I've also met people before that actually used a voice recorder app on their phone, and they would just talk through their ideas and their notes and make notes that way. And then after they went through whatever it was, they would go back and either type it up or jot it down or edit the transcript of it, because we have technology is great now. You can have it give you everything that you said in text. And then they clean it up that way, and it helps them kind of just talk through everything, but then also retain it, okay? So you are going to be creating a reading schedule for a 12-page book that you're going to have to annotate. I say 12-page book, 12-page story rather. You're going to have to annotate over a 3-day period, okay? So for many of you, reading those 12 pages may only take the one day, but you know you're going to have to make the annotations in the discussion post, and that's part of creating that schedule as well. If you know that you have an assignment due at the end of the week and you don't make your reading schedule take into account the time it will take to do the assignments, you've only done half of the work in that case. So I mentioned some of this before, but really to get a good outcome from active reading, you need to find a quiet place, and preferably the same place every time. I have a few colleagues that will go to like a coffee shop or someplace like that on the weekend, or they stay late at the school because they know if they go home that it's too difficult for them. When I was younger, I was much more productive at home than anywhere else, but now that I have a child at home, it makes it very difficult because how can I say no to my child wanting attention to me, for example. Make sure that you're doing all this when you're alert. So you know yourself, most people are actually more productive in the morning, believe it or not. But you may find it difficult to find motivation or to get up early. Maybe you're a night person, but if you set it too late, then maybe you're going to be sleepy or not want to do it. Make sure to build yourself in breaks and rewards. And for people who know that they may have burnout and they may need to get up for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something like that and then return to it, it may be worth planning out your break in the way that you plan what activity you're going to be doing during the break. So it may be a break from what you need to do, but it may not be something that you find fun, and thus it's not really going to distract you. So what I mean by this is, like, I'm working on content for your course, and if I want to take a break, I know it's going to be doing something like mopping the floor or doing laundry. And so sometimes I hit the point where I can't be working at the computer anymore. I'm being unproductive and it's time for a break. But my break is something that, while it will rejuvenate my brain, it's not something I necessarily want to do. So I'm not using it as an excuse to stop, if that makes sense. Okay, so other things to do. So I've created my schedule. I'm ready to sit down. It's quiet. I have the whatever I'm going to read in front of me. I know how I'm going to take notes. So what now? Okay, well, if you preview your text, then you really need to think about what you already know. This is especially useful if we're talking about nonfiction. So if I'm going to read a scientific study or something like that, or even in the case of fiction, if I know that I have to be analyzing for theme, then I may want to kind of think about what I know about theme in general, okay? And with that's where this understanding your purpose comes into play. Knowing why you're reading something and what you're going to be doing after really, really helps you pay attention to the right things. It's worth previewing the text and skimming it and scanning it, which are different things, ever so slightly, to know how the text is structured. And then, we've already talked about this some, but it's developing the time management strategies and being honest with yourself. And as we get older and more mature and understand ourselves better, it's really, really important to develop those strategies and being honest with yourself. What works for someone else is not necessarily going to work for you. And while you can't be perfect every day, knowing just what you can reasonably achieve helps you plan out your day so much better, so that you're not disappointed at the end of it. Okay, so accessing prior knowledge. What can you predict about the text? What do you already know? Is it similar to something that you've read before? Is there something in your background that may help you understand the text? Are you interested in the text? Because if you're going to be interested, then you may end up paying way more attention to it and finding those connections. And if you know that you're not, then you may be searching for a connection a lot more. And then finally, what do you hope to learn from your reading? If you have some sort of goal in mind for that, then you suddenly have something to look forward to, and you're not just kind of doing it to do it. So similarly to that, you need to know why you're reading. And, at the end of the day, pragmatically, it might be that you're simply doing it for an assignment case. But then what is the assignment? If you're going to be analyzing a thematic statement from an author, well then, okay, I'm going in knowing that I'm going to have to locate a theme and then how the author is supporting that theme. If I'm going to be discussing this with others, then I need to keep that in mind as well, because I have to find something relevant to other people when I pull it out, and I have to be able to communicate it in a way that they understand. Similarly, if I'm going to have to write about it, well then what kind of essay is it? If it's formal, then I'm going to have to be much more conscious of the fact that maybe I'm going to need to take quotations from this work, and if I'm marking them as I go, I'm not going to be struggling later trying to find them. I'm going to be reducing the amount of work that I'll be doing later. Okay, so preview your text. We have two things called scanning and skimming, and they're slightly different. Skimming is reading quickly. So you're just looking for the main idea and the large supporting details. And the advantage to this is that it doesn't take much time for you to get not quite a main idea out of it, in the sense that you may not be able to have an extended conversation with someone over this. But it gives you just more of the main idea in the sense you know what you're getting into. Also, visual signals, so how the author is putting words on the page in terms of, is there a section header with paragraphs? Is it a chapter book? How long are the chapters typically? Maybe you're reading a collection of short stories. So if any of you remember, some of you in high school may have read The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And it's one cohesive narrative as a book, but each chapter is written like a short story, and he kind of alternates between long chapters and very short chapters, and so you kind of have an idea or an expectation of what's coming even before you get there. Okay, so visual signals are things that are important that you can look for and kind of hone in on, like the title, the author's name, the opening paragraph, which usually tells you what everything else is going to be about, the first sentence of each paragraph, otherwise known as a topic sentence in a lot of cases. Does it have headings? Is it using italicized or bold words? Are there lists or other visuals like graphs? Is anything colorized, or is it just in black and white? A good author is going to be trying to draw your attention into what's important anyway, especially in nonfiction or scientific works. Scanning, on the other hand, is when you're looking for specific information. Like maybe you have a key word and you're trying to go through quickly to find a word or a phrase. So I know a lot of you may have experience with this. Maybe you have a quiz or a test and it's open book, and you're looking for the answer to something. So that would be scanning. Okay. The best way of going about scanning, very similar to skimming, is you're going to be looking for those breadcrumbs that the author is going to be leading you to important information, because almost always, if you're looking for a specific note of information within the text, it's probably something important. So now, if we're talking about time management strategies, which is in page 9 of the textbook, it goes over strategies from a first-year college textbook. And a good exercise for you is to first just skim and try to find the main idea and supporting details, and then like jot them down or something. Okay, and that's going to be different than you scanning to try to find information. Like if I said, oh, okay, describe a specific time management strategy, you would scan for that strategy and then write something down. So as you read, you're going to do what's called testing the text. Okay. So you're going to mark up the text or annotate. You're going to know what to mark up, and that's those clues we were talking about earlier. And then you are going to finally draw your conclusions. So I said mark up and I said annotate kind of interchangeably, but they're part of the same process. Mark up is just putting signals for yourself, like underlining or circling. And then annotating is really giving yourself the note of like what's important about that. So the signal is the underlining or highlighting or circling, and then the annotation is you tying an idea to that. Okay, so what is testing a text? That is an acronym that means thesis, evidence, summary, and transitions. Think of your thesis like your main idea. If you remember from high school, a thesis statement is typically the last sentence of an introduction. It doesn't have to be, but usually it's the last sentence of an introduction, or it's in the introduction somewhere. And you can think of it like your main idea. It's where the author is saying, hey, this is what this body of text is going to be about. Evidence is anything that the author is using to support that thesis. So that may be quotations from people, it may be evidence in terms of something like numbers, statistics, facts. Anecdotes would be someone's personal experience that they're pointing to, anything like that. Then you have a summary. So a lot of times in scientific work, they're going to go through whatever it is that they're talking about, and then at the end of it, they're going to recap it and say, okay, here are the important takeaways from that. And finally, transition words are super powerful. The difference between and but, for example, just whether it's a continuation or whether it's supposed to be a contrast or something like that is very important to pay attention to. Okay, so always look for them. Sometimes they're not going to be easy to spot, like a thesis statement can be rather tricky sometimes. An author may not be as obvious about what it is that they're writing about. Initially, they may try to hide it, or very rare cases, sometimes the thesis statement actually kind of happens like at the end or in the second paragraph because they have some sort of overarching story or some kind of clever thing that the author is trying to do, or they may experiment with these ideas and try to be clever or silly or anything else. They may assume that you know more than what you do, and so they feel like that they don't have to explain certain things and you kind of have to figure it out on your own. But if you're still using text as a way of analyzing it, then you will come away with the best understanding that you can. So we're going to try this out, and you're going to read What American Citizenship Makes Possible, and that's Colin Powell wrote that, and you can find it in pages 12 through 14. And so you're going to be underlining the key ideas there, like the topic sentences. You're going to be highlighting the words and phrases. You're going to be putting an asterisk or a star next to an important idea. Anything that resonates with you that you're like, yes, you're going to put those double check marks. If you see an important idea and then it ends up being like the idea, you would even put another asterisk next to it. You're going to draw lines or arrows if you see connected ideas or related ideas. You're going to put question marks beside anything that you're not sure about or that you don't know. This is a really, really good one. As an aside here, throughout the course, you're going to be making a vocabulary journal, and you're going to be having to add words to it that you're learning. And so if there's a word that you don't know, that's the perfect word to add to your vocabulary journal later. So you're kind of doing double duty here when you make a note for yourself that you're going to have to look something up anyway. And it's easy to look stuff up now with smartphones and Google and everything else, but it's important that you jot those down. So I would keep your vocabulary journal handy so that after you read, you can quickly go back through. You can scan for those question marks and then add them. Bracket text is stuff that you want to kind of set apart so that you can later come back to it. So it may be a paragraph or something like that more than just a word. And then if an author is saying, hey, I'm going to show you these 3 important points, then it's probably a good idea to number them as they come up, because the author is not always going to do that for you. They're not always going to number them. But it will help you organize the thoughts and the ideas and help you find them easier later. Additionally, authors put out signals by the words that they use. So, for example, if something is repeated a bunch, that probably means it's important. And similarly, they have other introductory phrases which can tell you a lot of information. So, for example, if we want to show that something is important and we say, hey, the primary reason for this, well, primary means like first. So, the first reason for this, the one that comes before all the others, the main one, the one that you should pay attention to. So, that author is basically slapping you upside the head and saying, hey, you really need to pay attention to this. They're doing the work for you. You just have to look out for it. So we have those for things like if they're linking ideas and saying we're continuing on with it. If they're making some sort of list, you have time, chronological, cause and effects. History is all cause and effects. So if you're reading something with history and they say this happened because of that, then we know that those are linked. If you want to introduce examples, well, for instance, as an example, if you want to compare things, likewise, similarly, or contrast things, unlike, although, are great ones. A contradiction can be very, very similar to contrasting something. In fact, they can overlap sometimes. If a author is going from a big idea to a specific idea in really breaking it down. So maybe they're going from their main idea in their introduction and then they've introduced their topic sentence and they're really getting into the specific examples, then these signals are a good way of seeing that. And finally, if they're wrapping up wherever they're at, maybe it's at the end of the entire work, or maybe it's just telling you, hey, this section is coming to an end. I'm about to introduce fresh ideas. There are words for those too. Okay, so there's another practice here for you, and you can kind of see that an example of this in action. So you were supposed to practice it, and then you get to see in the passage, in the textbook, what they did, where they underlined, where they circled, where they used question marks. And then I want you to reflect on yourself. So with this example, how similar would it be to what you would do? And really thinking about the how of that. How is it similar? How is it different? And do you understand why they did those things? Because if you don't understand at all why they underlined or circled, maybe they saw something that you missed, and it may be worth going back and kind of investigating that and then asking yourself, why did I miss it? Or maybe you saw something that they didn't, and then you say, oh, okay, well, I must be on the right track here. Okay. On the other hand, maybe you didn't do the same stuff as them because your purpose for reading that led you to put importance on different aspects than they did. And so I want you to consider that as well, especially when you look at the differences between what you did and they did. So when you're annotating the text, remember that's after you've marked up those underlining, those circling, those question marks, those stars. It's you jotting down ideas to tie that stuff together. And if you're not sure what to write for your annotations, like what am I supposed to write? I mean, I see that there's important stuff, but what do I say in those moments? Then you can consider these questions. Think about almost like a flow chart here, and kind of just keep these to the side somewhere and sort of just remind yourself of them. So you don't have to actually write the questions in your annotations. Annotations aren't necessarily complete sentences either, But if you've marked up a bunch of stuff, then you need to say, oh, is this going with the author's main idea? Or maybe is this about supporting details? Like, did they do enough here? Am I convinced of whatever it is they're trying to say? Uh, does this have to do with their audience? Like, why are they doing what they're doing? So there's a lot of like what's here, and the what's are to get you started. But ultimately, when you are writing your analysis, you should be saying like the why of it. So the author did this thing, and our annotations are telling us the what, but we're looking for common threads to eventually write about the why. Okay, here's a few more of them. And they can tell us things that maybe we don't initially know about the author. So, for example, maybe the author's vocabulary is very different than yours. That may tell us something about who the audience is. Maybe it's overly formal and technical language, like jargon. So maybe that tells us that our author is a professional or an expert in a field, and that he's writing to other people who already have a lot of experience in that field. We don't have to always agree with the points that the author is making, and sometimes we're not going to, and sometimes the author does that on purpose. Sometimes they want us to disagree with them and to feel disgust or hatred or whatever it is towards a point, because they actually want us to take the opposite position and drive us that way. Sometimes we agree with the points that the author is making, and they may give us some things that we easily agree with, and then launch something related to it that we may be unfamiliar with or may not agree with in hopes of convincing us. So it's understanding the intention behind the author, and that's what your annotations are supposed to get you towards. All right, so we've read, and remember we created a schedule for ourselves. So before we even read, we sat down, we said, why are we reading? We created a schedule for ourselves. We read, we annotated, we skimmed, we marked up. We did all of those things we considered questions. Now what do we do? Well, we have all like these sticky notes or all of these symbols. Well, what do we do with them? Well, we're going to put them all together through outlines and summaries and paraphrasing so that our ideas start to have structure to them. Okay, so an outline is going to kind of be just you creating a skeleton of whatever it is that you read. It could be in a totally different order than what you read, but oftentimes it's going to remain in the same order, and it's really just going to lay out the main ideas and main points. So almost like you were looking at a table of contents. You can see an example of this on page 12, but also in your textbook, page 80 has more information on formal outlines. And when we go to write essays, outlines are kind of our first place to go to as well. So just think of them like skeletons. Okay, summarizing, on the other hand, is going to be you writing and distilling down whatever it is the author's trying to say. Okay, but it's supposed to be in your own words. And so, yeah, you're going to review your own contents, and you're going to be using synonyms. And the whole point of not using the same language is because you're not trying to just straight up repeat what the author is saying. And that's for two reasons. One, if I wanted to read what the author was saying, I would just read what the author wrote. The other thing is, it doesn't show me comprehension, and it doesn't show you the comprehension if you use the exact same phrase. Sometimes you have to use similar words or a similar phrase because it's such a technical word. But if you find yourself just restating what the author is saying a lot, then that means that maybe you're missing something. Okay. The other thing to make sure that you're doing is that you say who the author is, or if you're very, very interested in the speaker or the narrator and it's someone that's not the author, then also identifying them as well and what it is that we're summarizing. So we need a title of some kind. Don't assume that whoever is going to be reading your summary knows what it is that we're talking about. Finally, after we've done that, we are going to kind of read back through or skim at the very least to make sure that we were accurate. Okay? And finally, remember where we want to avoid plagiarism whenever possible. So if we're just restating everything and it looks like we basically copied and pasted sentences, that's probably not a good thing, and it's going to get us dinged for plagiarism. Make sure that it's obvious that it's coming from you. How can we do that and make sure that what you're saying is genuine to you? Well, we can paraphrase what the author is saying instead of just using their words. Remember your own syntax, your own sentence. Use synonyms, so words that mean the same thing, as much as possible. And if you do use anything that the author says, because like we were saying before, that there's no way around that, you're going to put them in quotation marks, because that shows me that you're not trying to take credit for it. Okay, and finally, you reread everything that you write to make sure that it makes sense, and also to make sure that you're not accidentally making a boo-boo and plagiarizing or something like that. And finally, anything that isn't yours, anything that you use in quotation marks, we need to say where we get it from, and that's using an in-text citation. So remember I said we're going to be using MLA formats. Well, that's where the citations come in, and we'll be going over that more when we get to the research units, and these are the pages that you can look at if you're interested in that. Okay, so just to kind of recap this for just a second, it's important that what you use and turn in this class are your own words. I would rather have something that's not quite as good or perfect, but it comes from you, rather than something that came from the author or an AI, because it doesn't show that you comprehend or master or understand. And my goal here in this class is to make you a better reader and a better writer. We can't do that without some imperfections. All right, finally, let's kind of like review this. So remember, before you read, you were talking about your goal for reading. After you read, you should revisit that idea and say, okay, why did I read? What's my goal? And pragmatically, maybe your goal is, hey, I need to pass a test over this. Maybe I read this article because I'm in organic chemistry and I had to read this article about bonds of elements and compounds, and I have to take a test over it. And so I need to make a list of the important things I know are going to be on the test so that I can study it and memorize it. Okay. Similarly, for this class, there will be times where you'll need to review something and then have it in your brain so that you can make a good class discussion post or write an essay on it later. I want you to quiz yourself also. So after you've reviewed, you're then going to think about different types of questions and whether you understand them or not, okay? And so if I was thinking a test, or you were making a test for yourself, there are kind of three styles or types of questions that you can make. The first one are literal questions. And they're what we typically think of, where it would be, oh, who's the main character of this work? There's a very clear, succinct, 1 or 2 word answer to it. And you could easily make a multiple choice answer for it. And you can scan the text, find the answer, move on with your life. Okay. The next one are inference questions. And those are not outright stated anywhere, but you can figure them out by figuring and reading, and there's clues to it, right? So if the author never says whether they like baseball or not, okay, but the entire essay is about how basketball is better. They never say they hate baseball, but they say basketball is better because of this, football is better because of this, tennis is better because of that, and they end on it, why do we even play baseball? Okay. We can infer that the author doesn't like baseball even though they never said they don't like baseball. Inference questions are a great way to test your comprehension of something. Finally, we can evaluate something. Did that author who wrote about baseball, did they do a good job convincing us that baseball was bad? Well, we can look at it. We can say, did it sway us? We can evaluate their facts. Were they even accurate? And we can really see whether the author was effective at their work. So these are 3 styles of questions. And then finally, you write a response paragraph. So you have pre-read, you read, you mark it up, you draw your conclusions, you have some kind of outline, you've asked questions. Now the actual writing part should be very easy for you. You have everything you need already. You have evidence there that's easy for you to access and find. It's just about getting what's in your brain at this point out on the page. So you need to think about what it is that you're going to be writing about. And then you make that into a topic sentence for your paragraph. So what am I going to be writing about? And then simply you prove whatever it is that you're going to be writing about. So going back to what we were saying before, maybe we're evaluating how effective our author was at convincing us that whether baseball is bad or not. Okay, well, I'm going to take a position there. I think that the author did not do a good job convincing me that baseball sucks. Okay, I like baseball, and I still like baseball after reading this article. I don't agree with the positions. So I can then start nitpicking all of his facts for his article and saying why it is they're wrong. I can point to them by using quotations. I can do additional research. Say, oh, well, the average length of a baseball game is X. The average revenue is Y. Things like that. I can use transition words. Additionally, he's wrong because of this. There is a response paragraph modeled on page 27 for you. But really, I want you to take away for you from this I really want you to think about back in high school, whenever you were asked to write something, like a paper. And if you ever had a time where you just sat there and you stared at the paper and you didn't know what you were going to say. If you ever had one of those moments, then these strategies that we just spent quite a few minutes going over, reading about, talking about, everything, they're for you. Okay? They're for everyone, but they're especially for you. Because other people who make it look very easy, they just read something and then bam, they bang out a book almost in response to it without stopping. They do a lot of the same things that we just did. They're just doing it naturally. And it's because they've practiced them, whether they realize they've done it or not. Okay? So please, I implore you, go through each of these steps and then try to write a model response to something, and you'll see how easy it is for you when you do all of the pre-work by annotating, marking up, really reading closely. Okay, and then I want you to self-assess for yourself. Why would the strategies be useful? And then what ones do you already use and which ones do you need to pick up? I was just talking about how some people do it naturally. You probably do some of these naturally. But there are others that maybe you never heard of or have never tried out. And so which ones are you wanting to do there? Okay, finally, we have a checklist, kind of a review of what we just talked about. So, being an active reader, you need to do strategies before, during, after. And you really need to always be focused on your goal. Always be focused on your goal. And then by doing that, you'll have everything ready so that when you actually have to write a response, whether it's a paragraph or a paper or anything like that, you are prepared and it should be a lot easier for you. Now, that being said, it's not going to be perfect. There's a whole reason why we revise and we edit and everything else. But it will get it out of you and onto the page much easier than if you didn't do these things. Now, that being said, that's the end of lecture 1. Not all the lectures are going to be quite this long. It will depend on what we're talking about that week. But they will be in a similar format. So I'm just going to be kind of talking through the slides and everything like that. I hope that this is useful for you. And I look forward to reading your responses and your discussion posts as we work through this course together. Don't forget that if you need anything, there's a discussion post or you can email me. Remember, this is asynchronous and it's up to you. You have a week to complete everything, and then that next Monday, it's go time again for you. You really need to set a schedule and try to stay on top of stuff, but I'm here for you, okay? So I hope that helped, and I'll be hearing from you and seeing your discussion post soon. Thank you.